My name is Margaret, and I never thought I'd live to see the day my own son would look at me like I was a stranger. For years I raised him with trembling hands, scrubbing dishes in silence, and praying he'd grow into a man who remembered where he came from. But then she arrived, my daughter-in-law, with her perfect smile and sharp tongue, turned my son against me in ways I never imagined. One night, as I set the table for dinner, I overheard her whisper, "Your mother is nothing but dead weight. The best gift she could give us is leaving forever." My chest went cold, my knees shook. And when my son laughed instead of defending me, something inside me shattered. From that day forward, I stopped being the quiet, obedient mother. From that day forward, I started planning my revenge. I still remember the first time she walked into my house, my daughter-in-law, the woman who would later tear apart everything I built with my own hands. She wore a red dress that clung too tightly to her figure, her lipstick the same shade of blood. When she smiled, the entire room seemed to light up, and for a moment, even I was fooled. But when her eyes landed on me, her smile sharpened like a blade. I reached out to shake her hand. My palms were warm, damp with nervousness, but hers were ice cold. "So nice to finally meet you," I whispered. She only tilted her head, her eyes darting toward my son as if to say, "Why do we even need her here?" That night, I set the table carefully, making sure the napkins were folded just right, the plates shining under the chandelier. It was supposed to be a family dinner, a celebration. Instead, it became the first scene of my humiliation. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his hand as if I weren't sitting right there. And when I asked her about her family, she shrugged, swirling her wine glass lazily. "Oh, we don't keep in touch with old traditions. Some things just hold you back." Her eyes lingered on me when she said it. My son didn't notice. He looked at her like she was the only woman in the room. My heart clenched. For 28 years, I raised him, prayed over him, sacrificed everything. And now, one smile from her erased me. The days that followed were worse. She criticized how I cooked too much salt, not enough flavor. She rearranged my kitchen without asking, and when I quietly put things back, she laughed, calling me old-fashioned. I told myself to be patient, to give her time, but the whispers began. One night, I passed by the living room and heard her voice, low and sharp. "She's always hovering. Doesn't it bother you? You're a grown man, and she still treats you like a child." My son's reply was muffled, but I caught his laugh. That laugh burned in my ears all night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my hands trembling on the blanket, asking myself when my son stopped defending me. Days later, the final straw came. I had just set down a tray of tea when I heard her murmur to him, "Your mother is just in the way. Dead weight, really. If she weren't around, life would be so much easier." The teacup slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Both of them looked at me. She didn't even flinch. She just smiled. My heart froze in my chest, and in that silence I asked myself, if this is how it begins, how will it end? I used to dream of big family gatherings, long tables filled with laughter, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air, children running through the hallway. That dream died the moment she became my son's wife. Holidays turned into battlefields. Thanksgiving, once my pride, became a stage for her to showcase her modern recipes. She'd stand in my kitchen with her manicured nails and silk blouse, pushing my old pots aside. "We don't need so much grease, Margaret. People these days prefer healthier food." Her words dripped with sweetness, but the sting was deliberate. I'd bite my tongue, pressing it hard against the roof of my mouth until I tasted blood, because my son's eyes would always dart toward her, not me. He nodded, as if she were the authority, not the woman who raised him. The first real wound came at Christmas. I had decorated the living room with gold ribbons, and the old nativity set my mother left me. My son used to love it, but when they walked in, she wrinkled her nose. "This looks dated. Maybe next year we can do something more tasteful." She replaced my golden star with a sleek silver ornament she brought herself. My son helped her hang it, laughing while I stood frozen with the angel still clutched in my hands. Meals became silent torture. I'd place dishes on the table, the silverware rattling against the plates because my hands shook so much. She would whisper things to him I couldn't hear, but I saw the smirk on her lips, the way his jaw tightened. Sometimes I'd try to speak about the weather, the garden, old family memories, but my words dropped like stones into water. No ripples, no response, and then came the night I will never forget. A family dinner. His cousins, my sister, even the neighbors were there. I had cooked all day, sweat soaking my back, hands raw from chopping and stirring. As I placed the last dish on the table, she leaned close to him and whispered something. He stood up, glass in hand, and said loudly, "We don't need to live like this anymore. Times have changed. My wife knows better. Mom, maybe you should just rest. Stop trying so hard." Laughter rippled around the table, not cruel laughter, just awkward, nervous chuckles, but it didn't matter. My ears burned, my throat tightened, my own son humiliating me in front of family, as if I were an unwanted guest in my own home. I excused myself, retreating to the kitchen. The walls closed in, the smell of garlic and butter suddenly nauseating. I pressed my palms against the counter, tears falling onto the cutting board. Through the doorway, I could hear them. Her voice bright and cheerful, his laugh following hers like a loyal dog. That night, as I sat alone in the dark kitchen, I realized something I never wanted to admit. She wasn't just trying to take my son. She was trying to erase me, piece by piece, memory by memory. And I asked myself, with my hands trembling in the silence, how long before he forgets I ever existed? For weeks after that humiliating dinner, I lived in silence. My footsteps echoed in empty rooms, the ticking of the old wall clock growing louder with every passing hour. I stopped cooking big meals. I stopped decorating for holidays. My house, once filled with warmth, turned cold, like a museum no one wanted to visit. But silence has a way of sharpening your ears, and one night it revealed the first crack in her mask. I had gone upstairs to put away laundry when I heard voices drifting up from the study. Their voices. I froze at the top of the stairs, clutching a stack of folded towels to my chest. My son's voice was hushed, worried. Hers was sharp, cutting through him like glass. "She won't be around forever," she whispered. "Once she's gone, the house, the accounts, everything, it'll all be ours. But you need to convince her to sign. Sooner, not later." My breath caught. The towels slipped from my arms, tumbling down the steps like broken wings. I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. My son murmured something I couldn't make out, but then she laughed. A laugh so cold it made my blood run still. I stumbled into my room, shaking, gripping the edge of the dresser until my knuckles turned white. She wasn't just turning him against me. She wanted everything, my house, my savings, the very life I built brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. The days that followed were unbearable. My phone rang less and less. When I called him, he didn't answer, or he'd cut the conversation short with, "I'll call you later, Mom." Later never came. At family gatherings, they arrived late, left early, and never once looked back at me. Then came the letter. A stack of mail sat on the hallway table, and tucked between the envelopes was one addressed to me, but written in my son's handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a neatly folded document, a request to transfer ownership of my savings account into a joint account with him and his wife. For my convenience, he wrote, for future planning. My vision blurred. The paper crumpled in my fists as tears spilled onto the ink, smudging his signature. My own son, the boy I had stayed awake with on sick nights. The boy I had worked double shifts to feed, he wanted my money. Not my love, not my presence, just my money. That night, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the shadows dancing across the walls. Every creak of the house sounded like a whisper mocking me. I thought of all the years I had lived for them, only to be treated like a burden to erase. And then, as the clock struck midnight, I realized something that chilled me deeper than any winter night. They weren't planning for me to leave. They were planning for me to disappear. The question echoed in my mind as I gripped the torn document in my shaking hands. What if their plan wasn't to wait for me to die, but to make sure I did? There are moments in life when your soul shatters so completely, you can hear the pieces fall. My breaking point came on a night that should have been simple, ordinary. It was a Sunday evening. I had made stew, the kind my son used to beg for as a child, thick with carrots and potatoes, simmered for hours until the smell filled every corner of the house. I hoped, foolishly, that maybe the warmth of it would remind him of home, of me. They arrived late. She swept in first, her heels clicking against the wooden floor like tiny hammers driving nails into my heart. My son followed, phone in hand, barely glancing up. We sat at the table. I served them with hands that trembled so badly the spoon clattered against the bowl. She pushed the food around with her fork, wrinkling her nose. "This is heavy. You really should stop cooking like this, Margaret. It's no wonder you're always so tired." Her words sliced through me, but worse was my son's silence. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. The rest of the meal was filled with their whispers. She leaned close to him, lips brushing his ear, while I sat on the other side of the table, invisible. My stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from the growing certainty that I had lost him completely. And then it happened. I had risen to clear the dishes when I heard her voice, clear and sharp. "The best gift your mother could give us is if she just died." The plate slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor. My son froze, fork halfway to his mouth. For a split second, I prayed he would say something. Anything, that he would defend me. Instead, he laughed, a short, nervous laugh, but it was enough. My knees went weak. The sound of his laughter echoed in my skull, drowning out everything else. My vision blurred, my chest ached, and for a moment I thought I might collapse right there on the kitchen tiles. I stared at him, at both of them, as they looked back with the calm certainty that I was nothing. My son's eyes, they weren't the eyes of the boy I raised. They belonged to someone else, someone she had created. I left the room without a word, retreating into the darkness of my bedroom. I pressed my fists against my mouth to stifle the sobs, my body shaking so violently the mattress creaked beneath me. Hours passed, but I couldn't sleep. Her words looped in my head, cruel and final. His laugh, my son's laugh, burned like acid in my chest. That was the night I stopped being the quiet, obedient mother. That was the night the grief hardened into something else, something colder. And as dawn broke, spilling pale light across my wrinkled hands, I whispered to myself, if they want me gone, what would happen if I disappeared on my own terms? Revenge doesn't arrive like a storm. It starts as a whisper in the dark, a seed planted in the cracks of your soul. That night, after hearing my son laugh at the thought of my death, I stopped being their victim. I became their shadow. I started small. The very next morning, I walked to the bank. The clerk smiled at me kindly as I withdrew everything, every penny from the account my son thought he would inherit. My hands trembled as I signed the papers, but my heart was steady. For the first time in years, I felt control. I didn't tell him, I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I let them live as if nothing had changed. She still whispered poison into his ear. He still ignored my calls, but slowly, silently, I began cutting the strings they thought they controlled. My house was next. I changed the locks without warning. When they came over one evening, arms full of shopping bags, they found the key no longer fit. She knocked hard, her nails clicking against the door like claws. My son called out, "Mom, the lock's broken." I opened the door just enough to look her in the eye. "The lock works fine," I said, then shut it again. The slam echoed down the street. I pressed my back against the door, heart pounding, but I smiled through the tears. That was only the beginning. I started watching them quietly, carefully. When my son called, I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail. When they invited me to dinner, I declined with excuses they couldn't challenge. Little by little, I became a ghost in their lives, forcing them to feel my absence. And then I struck harder. I knew about her secrets because women like her always have them. Late at night, when the house was still, I scrolled through old emails and overheard phone calls. Debt collectors, credit card bills in her name, a shopping addiction she hid from him, disguised under smiles and charm. I gathered everything, printed the statements, highlighted the amounts. When the time was right, I left the envelope on my son's desk where she couldn't hide it. The next day, I heard them argue through the thin walls of their home. His voice raised, hers sharp, then breaking. The sound of a glass shattering against the floor. I sat by my window, sipping tea, listening to the war I had lit inside their perfect little castle. For once, I didn't cry, I didn't tremble. My hands were steady as I held the cup, the steam fogging my glasses. But I wasn't finished. This was only the first crack, because I knew the deeper I dug, the more filth I would find. And once the truth was exposed, she wouldn't just lose my son's love. She would lose everything. The question burning in my chest that night was simple, chilling, and delicious. When the mask finally falls, who will my son believe? Her or me? Revenge is never loud. It's not screaming matches or flying dishes. No, it's quiet, cold, precise. And when it finally lands, it leaves scars no apology can erase. By the time I struck the final blow, I had already cut away everything they thought belonged to them. The money, the house, the comfort of my silence, but I knew it wasn't enough. She had taken my son from me, twisted him until he no longer saw me as his mother. To wound her fully, I had to take from her what she valued most, control. The opportunity came on a rainy Tuesday. I received a phone call, an old friend from the community board. She had seen my daughter, in law at the bank, begging for an extension on unpaid loans. My lips curled into a smile, so faint it almost hurt. The perfect mask was cracking. That night, I invited them for dinner. Just the three of us, one last supper. My hands shook as I laid the table, but not from fear, from anticipation. The stew simmered, the smell of garlic and thyme filling the air. My son arrived first, carrying flowers. She followed behind him, dressed in white, as if purity could be stitched into fabric. We ate in silence. I let them believe it was a truce, that I was surrendering. Then, when the plates were cleared, I placed a folder on the table. Slowly, carefully, I slid it toward my son. "What's this?" he asked. "Truth," I whispered. Inside were her debts, her hidden accounts, the proof of every lie she had wrapped around his neck. His hands trembled as he read, her face drained of color. "That's not." "She's twisting this," she sputtered, but the words fell flat. My son's eyes darted between us, confusion hardening into anger. For the first time in months, he looked at me, not with disdain, but with shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but she slammed her fist on the table. "She's doing this to destroy us. Can't you see? She's jealous. She's bitter." Her voice cracked. She grabbed his arm, but he pulled away. The look in his eyes told me everything. He saw it. He finally saw her. The room filled with silence, the kind that drowns, suffocates. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair over, tears streaking her makeup. Without a word, she stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls shook. My son stayed. He sat across from me, head in his hands, breathing ragged. "Mom, is it true? All of it?" I didn't answer. I let the silence speak, the papers lying like open wounds between us. For the first time, he didn't look at me as a burden. He looked at me as the one person who had never lied to him, the one he should have protected. And as his tears fell onto the folder, I felt no joy, no relief, only a strange, hollow victory. Because deep down, one question echoed louder than his sobs. Now that I've destroyed her, have I destroyed him too? People say revenge tastes sweet, but they never tell you how bitter it feels afterward, lingering on your tongue like ashes. I thought that by exposing her lies, by shattering the perfect mask she wore, I would feel alive again. I thought my son would finally see me, love me the way he once did when he was small, and would run into my arms after scraping his knee. But the truth, revenge didn't give me back my son. It only proved how far I had already lost him. The house is quiet now. Too quiet. The laughter that once filled these walls is gone. The sound of his voice, his real voice, not the one she trained, comes to me only through a phone line that never rings. When he does visit, he sits at the edge of the chair, his words careful, cautious, as though I am a stranger he is still learning to trust. And maybe I am, because I am no longer the mother I once was. That woman died the night I heard him laugh at my death. What remains is someone colder, sharper, someone who knows the price of silence and the weight of secrets. I watch from my window sometimes, the world moving on without me, families walking hand in hand, mothers and sons laughing in grocery store aisles. And I wonder, did I win, or did I simply burn down everything, including myself? But then I remember her face. That mask cracking, the panic in her eyes as her lies unraveled in front of him. That memory is the only comfort I have left, the only proof that I was not completely erased. Some nights I sit at the table with a single cup of tea, my hands no longer shake, I don't cry, I don't beg. I just exist, and as I close this diary tonight, I realize something. Revenge doesn't heal you, it doesn't fix the broken pieces. It only makes sure the one who broke you bleeds too. So if she ever whispers my name again, I know it will not be with triumph. It will be with fear, and that is enough. A pause, silence. The diary shuts with a soft thud. The screen